Our recording, though, is just of our speakers today, so any girls' faces won't be included in our recording, neither will your names. Our recording will be posted to YouTube after today so that you can utilize this recording or share it with other Girl Scouts, friends, family that might want to tune in. Our chat box is closed for the moment, except for anything coming to me. So if you have any technical issues or questions, please feel free to enter them into the chat box. We will open up our chat box later to take questions from our expert, And all of that being said, I'm going to turn things over now to our CEO of Girl Scouts of Colorado, Leanna Clark.
Hi, Girl Scouts. It is so wonderful to see your faces, and I love the creative names that some of you are using on your Zoom profiles. They're awesome. So honored to be here and join you today. I'm going to introduce our speaker, Donna Lynne, but first I'm going to lead you in the Girl Scout Promise and Law. So follow along with me at home. I won't be able to hear you, but I trust that you're going to follow along with me. On my honor, I will try to serve God and my country, to help people at all times, and to live by the Girl Scout law. I will do my best to be honest and fair, friendly and helpful, considerate and caring, courageous and strong, and responsible for what I say and do, and to respect myself and others, respect authority, use resources wisely, make the world a better place, and be a sister to every Girl Scout. Thank you for joining me in that. And I am now going to go ahead and introduce my friend, Donna Lynne. This is a really special treat for me to be joining you today to introduce Donna. She is an amazing woman who I am honored to know and call my friend for about the last 15 years now. So Donna Lynne is our former Lieutenant Governor and Chief Operating Officer of the state of Colorado. A Chief Operating Officer is also called a COO. And now Donna serves as COO at Columbia University Medical Center in New York City. And she's joining us today from her home in Manhattan. And she can talk to you more about what a COO does, but it's a huge job that oversees all the day-to-day functions, the administrative functions, operational functions of an organization. So in other words, she is in charge of getting stuff done, and she does do that, I know by experience. Donna's entrance into politics is a bit different from a lot of politicians or folks who have served in government, and I'll let her tell you about that. But what I really want you to listen for, Girl Scouts, is her story of how she honed her skills as a businesswoman and got involved and active in the community, and how that led to her becoming Lieutenant Governor and serving our state. She did incredible things for our state in that role and really elevated the job of Lieutenant Governor overall. Donna is also a doctor. She has her PhD in public health, and Girl Scouts of Colorado honored her as one of our own women of distinction among so many other amazing awards that she's received. And on a personal level, Donna is an incredible athlete. She has climbed every single 14er in the state of Colorado, and now she's working on hiking the highest points of each state in the United States. So she's driving from state to state to climb to that state's highest point, and she's done 22 so far. So she is just accomplished in so many ways, and you are in for a real treat. So I'm going to turn it over to my friend, Donna Lynne.
Great, thank you, Leanna, and hello to everybody. And I'm so excited. This is probably the most fun that I've had in I can't tell you how many months, other than what Leanna said about hiking. So welcome, and I know these are very challenging times for all of us. And we'd rather be together as a group in person, but we'll see if this Zoom and the chat box can help us connect a little bit. As Leanna said, I was originally a brownie growing up, and then a Girl Scout. And for me, Girl Scouts was a place to make friendships outside of just my small community that I grew up in. I grew up here on the East Coast in New Jersey. And, you know, you played with your neighbors and your friends in the neighborhood, or maybe who you were in school with. But being a Girl Scout gave you an opportunity to meet other girls who maybe came from different communities or different backgrounds. And so for me, it was eye-opening to allow me to meet other people. Believe it or not, when I was growing up, I always knew that I wanted to be civically engaged. And I know you're focusing on civics, and of course we have a presidential election, and an election in Colorado for a new senator. And I always was moved by something that John Kennedy, who was our president from 1960 to 1963, said, which was, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. And in that little phrase, which I'm sure many of you have heard, it just said to me, I need to do something to give back. So I very intentionally am going to college, and then afterwards said, I really want to be part of government. I think that being active in government and being a strong leader is important, because you can impact change. And it's not to say that people that go into the private sector aren't civically engaged, but for me, by working in government, it became a full-time occupation and profession. I did that for 20 years here in New York City. And then I went into healthcare, because a lot of the work that I was doing already in government connected to healthcare. And then moved to Colorado in 2005 because I got a job offer to work in Colorado to run Kaiser Permanente, which is a health plan. Some of your parents may be members of it. You may have had healthcare at one of the Kaiser locations in Colorado. And while it's a health plan, it also has a sense of civic and a community responsibility, which really attracted me, because you want to do more than just your job. You want to be able to, as I said, connect with people outside of that community that you're in. And one of the things that Kaiser did that I really liked is it sponsored a lot of other nonprofit organizations. It actually gave its employees a day off to go work and do things like build a house for Habitat for Humanity, or make trails in the mountains so that people can have great hiking experiences, or work in a homeless shelter. So no matter what I was doing, whether I was working in government and trying to help people that I felt were in need of certain services, or I was in a healthcare organization that certainly was taking care of people, that I was still spending time outside of the day to do things in the community. And again, it just broadens your perspective outside of your immediate family, the immediate circle of friends that you have, or your immediate community. And that's what we realize. The more we spend time outside, the more we learn how different people are, but they have the same sort of fundamental yearning, which is for connection. So I spent 15 years in Colorado, and as Leanna said, I was privileged to be her friend and the friend of so many great people in Colorado. At one point while I was working at Kaiser, the governor said to me, I need a lieutenant governor. And oftentimes people, even in their 40s and 50s, say, what's a lieutenant governor? So I'll try to give you a little sense of that. The governor, much like the president of the United States, and of course there's a governor in each of the 50 states, often needs somebody who I would say stays behind and, as Leanna said, gets the work done. Because governors often have to go off and give speeches or travel. And my job was to make sure that the state was delivering to everybody who lived in the state what it had promised to do. And so as a lieutenant governor and chief operating officer, I was responsible for a $30 billion budget and for about 31,000 employees. And those employees did a whole variety of things, from agricultural, making sure that, excuse me, we were inspecting crops, to public safety, that we were making sure that people were safe on the highways, to social services, providing care for juvenile delinquents who were in various detention facilities, to providing health care, education, all of the things that we all experience as part of our daily lives that actually run through state government and oftentimes through local government. And what the governor asked me to do, excuse me, for about a 3-year period was to deliver on a promise that he had, which was to make people more aware of what government did and to put trust in government. And I think that's a really important thing, particularly right now. We're at a crazy time in our country's history, but the truth is most people go into government service to do the right thing, whether they're bus drivers or train drivers or people that work in prisons. A lot of the people that work in government have very tough jobs, and it's important, if your parents are one of them, to give them a hug and to give them a thank you, or if you have a neighbor who delivers the mail, who sweeps the streets, who takes away the garbage, or who's a firefighter or a police officer, is to every once in a while say thank you to them, because their jobs are hard. And I also felt it was really important for me to not only make sure that we delivered, but to give the people that worked in state government their own pat on the back, their own thank you, and to invest in them in their careers. So it was probably the most fascinating job that I've had. One of the things that I did, because I said, I can't be the lieutenant governor if I haven't been to every county in Colorado. And so over about a 6-month period, I would take 4 or 5 days, and I would drive around to all the counties and to many of the cities and towns within those counties and get to know people. I'd walk into stores. I'd make appointments with other government officials. I'd listen to business people. I'd listen to people who were maybe in a homeless shelter, and learned what they as citizens really wanted back from government. And so I was very fortunate to be able to do that. And then to come back to Denver, to the state capitol, and be able to say, you know, I've heard, we might think we know what we're doing, but I've heard directly from the community what they want. So it was a very, very exciting part of my job. As you probably know, anybody in government who's in these very high level positions, the governor, the lieutenant governor, the treasurer, a senator, or an assembly person, there's something called term limits in Colorado and in many states around the country. So you can't stay in that job forever. The voters have to have new choices. In the case of Governor Hickenlooper, who was our governor in Colorado for 8 years, I served with him for 3 years, and then we were done. And I had to make the sad choice of leaving behind many of my good friends in Colorado and come back to New York. One thing that you don't know about me that I'm proud to share is that I am a mother of 3. And one of my children lives in Colorado right now. And I go back periodically, less frequently because of COVID, but I definitely go back to see my son and my friends. And then I have 2 children here, and I'm a new grandmother, and that's quite a bit of fun. So that's a little bit of my history. I guess I'd say 2 things to you, maybe to wrap it up, and then happy to take questions, is I think the lesson, when I'm often asked, what's the number one lesson that you've learned as you've become, as you've advanced through your career and you've become a leader? And I always say the number one thing is to take risks and to not be afraid of taking those risks. Now, that doesn't mean jump off of a 20-story building. What it means is speak up, don't be afraid. Sometimes people hold back and don't voice an opinion. And even if your opinion is different than what you might be hearing, most people are going down a path. Your opinion is important because it's different. And as I said, part of understanding this community that we are in and this country and even this world is to understand different perspectives. So risk-taking can be as simple as you raise your hand and you speak up when maybe you're feeling like you're the only one in the room that has that point of view. And believe me, more often than not, you'll find out that that isn't the case. And the other is to push yourself. As Leanna said, I started climbing the 14ers in Colorado when I was 53 years old. Some of them are really hard. They require a lot of balance. They require a lot of stamina. But I thought of it as a challenge and an opportunity for me to continue to learn. And without that in my line of sight, my life wouldn't be as wonderful as it has been professionally, or I would say even personally. So that willingness to take a risk, to speak up, to take on new challenges, to learn, and to not be afraid of making mistakes, I think is probably the most important lesson that I've learned in life. And it will continue to be an important part of my journey, whatever it is that I decide to do next. So I think I'm happy to wrap up and maybe take some questions, and anything fair game. What did I eat last night? I'll try to remember that.
Thank you so much. That was very interesting. I appreciate it. So our chat box is now open for questions. So we will read them out loud. So please, girls, feel free to enter in your questions. We also have Leanna, who is our CEO at Girl Scouts, on as well. So if you have a question or two for her, I know she'd be happy to answer them. I will kick things off as we wait for some questions to come in and ask, how do you feel your experience as a Girl Scout has impacted you as an adult?
Yeah, and actually I was just reflecting on, I probably should have told you a little bit more about me being a Girl Scout. I was one of those hyper Girl Scouts that wanted as many badges as I could, not surprisingly. But again, it wasn't so much about the competitive part. It was the diversity of the different badges that you could get for things that I had never been exposed to before. And so I loved the fact that I could learn new skills. I could learn things about the arts that I didn't know, that I could learn things about hiking. And I loved that challenge. And again, I think it's sort of reflected in who I am and the fact that I am urging you to continue to try to learn and to do different things in your life. So that was a pretty formative part of being a Girl Scout. The other part was certainly, I loved camping. I mean, my parents were not at all athletic, into the wilderness. I grew up in sort of a very cookie cutter suburb, and the woods and the mountains were very far away, but I remember going to camp in Windowin in New Jersey. And that was where I learned, you know, how to make a sit-upon and how to build a fire, and, you know, the fun of being with other girls in a tent and then exploring at night.
Love that. Okay, so we have a bunch of questions have come in. I'm going to try to, since we're talking about Girl Scouts, I'm going to see if we can answer or have you answer some of the ones that are Girl Scout related, and then we'll go back through. So girls, you don't have to enter in your questions multiple times. We'll make sure that we go back through the chat log. Okay, so I'm going to keep with the Girl Scout theme. Do you remember what your favorite badge was that you earned?
Yeah, it's a really weird one. I do remember what it was. It was puppeteering. And it was because it was so far afield from what I liked doing. You know, I was a little bit of a tomboy. I don't even know if people still use that word now. It's sort of, it's like, I am a girl, but I want to be a tomboy. I want to be a Tom girl. I don't know, or a Donna girl. So I loved sports and I loved things like that, but puppeteering was like magical to me. And that was my favorite badge.
I love that. What was the most fun part of being Lieutenant Governor?
I think the most fun part was being able to go into places that I never had been in before. So I went to all of our prisons in Colorado, and I actually went into the jails themselves and talked to some of the people that were in jail. And then in one of the things that we do in our prisons that you may not know about it is the people who are in prison work. And they do think we have in Colorado Springs and Canyon City, where our prisons are, we farm fish. So if you eat tilapia, there's a good chance it came from one of our prison fish farms. And we also, if you eat mozzarella cheese, a lot of the milk for our mozzarella cheese comes from the prisons and from the buffalo that they have there. So that was pretty fun, being able to see a whole part of the state services that I hadn't seen before.
Wonderful.
I saw somebody ask me what it's like to have kids, and I want to answer that question because you're all kids, right? So I would say it transformed me from being somebody who was all about work to having that same kind of energy to having children. And it's the best, but sometimes the worst job ever because your kids are your pride and joy. They make you cry, they make you happy, but they also drive you crazy sometimes. And as I'm now a grandmother, my grandson is this cute little 3-month-old, and all I can think about is my son, who's his father, was absolutely my worst child from a behavior point of view. He always got in trouble. And now I'm thinking, I can't wait till he has his first incident with his son. And now I'm going to say, aha, now you know what I had to go through with you.
Okay, I'm going back through here. Here's a great question. Do you remember when you first voted and how you felt? And that is from Amalia, who is a Girl Scout junior.
Yes, I do remember because not only did I vote, but I worked on the presidential candidates campaign as a volunteer. I went to college in New Hampshire, and I think as many of you know, New Hampshire has the very first primary in the country. Iowa has what's called a caucus, but the first time you literally go to a poll and everybody votes is in New Hampshire. And so New Hampshire is the place where there's a lot of excitement because the first person who wins that primary often gets a lot of attention. They don't always end up winning the nomination. And so I worked for George McGovern, who was the candidate in 1972. I was a freshman in college, and I knocked doors and handed out pamphlets to people. And more importantly, irrespective of the party that represented, I was encouraging people to vote, and then I got to vote myself, and it was pretty exciting because I do believe that every single vote matters, and we have to act that way because we're fortunate because there are still countries where not everybody can vote. Have I ever been on the news? Ooh, a lot.
Okay, going back through here, somebody asked, what is the most recent hike you went on, and have you had official training to hike or climb these very high mountains?
Yes, so when I moved to Colorado, I joined something called the Colorado Mountain Club, which is a nonprofit organization. They're right in Golden, and they have like a beautiful museum there. If any of you are interested in hiking, get your parents to take you there. It's the American Mountaineering Center, and they have all kinds of great exhibits about hiking, as well as a Museum of Nature and Science, which has something called Expedition Health, which I actually helped supported financially when I was at Kaiser. And it's, you can sort of go through the experience of climbing Mount Evans. So anyway, I took a bunch of little classes from wilderness trekking school to high altitude mountaineering to survival skills, knot tying. Like you have to learn how to tie knots like you do in scouting because you use ropes. And so yeah, I took a lot of classes. And again, another way to not only get my skills up, but to meet other people that were similarly minded. My last hikes were actually a couple of weeks ago. I was in Nebraska, Kansas, and Oklahoma. Not much of a hike in Nebraska and Kansas, a little bit more of a drive up, but Oklahoma was fun, a place called Black Mesa, way on the, what would I guess be the Panhandle, actually not that far from Colorado. Next weekend, I'm gonna be going to, it's called the Southern Six Pack. It is Tennessee, Kentucky, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia. And that's, I'm gonna do that in 2.5 days.
That sounds really fun. I'm a little jealous. Okay, here. Do you keep in touch with any of your sister Girl Scouts?
Wow, I do not. I do keep in touch with one of my junior high friends. We were in different, she was a Girl Scout, but we weren't in the same troop.
That was a great question. And there was another wonderful question. I want to make sure that I'm getting to all of them. What do you see yourself doing 10 years from now?
That's a great question, and I have absolutely no idea. I do hope, I love to work. It's exciting. I'm always learning. Certainly the last 6 months, 8 months for all of us have been constant learning and adapting. And I love working in a university. It's different. But, you know, in a perfect world, what I'd love to do is be back in, 3 months in Colorado, preferably around ski season, because I still ski a lot, and 3 months in New York, because I do have my 2 children here and my grandson, and hopefully I'm going to have a brownie. I'm going to have a Daisy, a brownie, a Girl Scout someday as my granddaughter. So that's probably it. I hope I'm still skiing, and I hope I'm still hiking, and I'm pretty confident that I will be.
Awesome. So here's a really great question. And this is from Cora. I'm just going to read how she wrote it. I am working on my Take Action badge. I have to work on a community project. It's so hard to tackle a problem. How did you work on community programs or projects while being Lieutenant Governor? And if you can give girls any tips to how to even start going about making a sustainable positive impact.
Sure. There's a couple of organizations, if you can write this down or type it into your computer or whatever. One of the great organizations in Colorado is called Metro Volunteers. And they pull together lots of people and lots of organizations where you can actually volunteer, as little as a couple of days or maybe on a more regular basis, and just get familiar with all the places where we try in Colorado to support oftentimes people that don't have some of the things that we have, that we take for granted, whether it's a car or it's a home or it's enough food to eat. So I would suggest that their website in and of itself is probably pretty informative as you think about a community-based organization. And you might be able, through your parents to get involved and volunteer for somebody like that.
Great. And everybody, I'm taking a few notes here about some of the things that Donna has told us about, and I'll send them out in a follow-up email after our session today. So you mentioned this, but Danny asked, have you ever been on the news? And can you tell us what that's like to be on the news and to be interviewed?
I've been on the news a lot. You can go Google me afterwards and you can find all kinds of things that I've been on the news about. Like public speaking, which you all should practice, right? I'm sure, from giving a book report or a report in class, you need to get comfortable with that. But there's always a little anxiety right before you start. I've been in debates because I also ran for governor in 2018. And so I was on the debate stage with other candidates, and you had to perform for an hour or 90 minutes. But I've been interviewed a lot by news stations. And one of the things that you always have to think about is, what is the worst possible question that somebody could ask me? And that way, the news reporters are not there to make nice news. They're there to make headlines. And headlines often come from posing difficult questions to someone or trying to, quite frankly, trap them. And so part of preparing to be able to speak to the news media, which I've literally done thousands of times, is think about the worst possible question they could ask you and be prepared with that answer.
That's great advice. Okay, so two questions that came in that are a little bit related to each other, and you can choose how you want to answer them or if you want to answer them at all. And that is, how old are you and how old is your oldest child?
Well, if you add up how old the two numbers, I'm going to give you a quiz. The sum of my age is 13.
I'm going to turn
There's two numbers,
mathematician Girl Scouts out there.
and they're sequential. That's the easy part. So what two numbers add up to 13 that are sequential?
The chat box is open.
Somebody's got to be able to get this one. Yay, thank you, Catherine. Hopefully you thought I was at least 10 years younger. And my oldest child is 41. So I have a 41-year-old, a 39-year-old, and a 37-year-old.
Hey, Raylee asked, I'm working on my silver award and I was wondering if you earned your silver award, and if you did, what did you do? And I'll add on to that, if you didn't, can you remember any projects you did as a Girl Scout, any like community-based projects that you worked on?
Yeah, so we didn't have, so I remember I was a Girl Scout from probably 1960 to 1970. I would say that's sort of my range, right? Of being a brownie to a Girl Scout. So we didn't have silver awards. We really just had badges. But we did have community projects. Usually our troop leader would pick the community project, and then we would go as a group or sometimes as a subgroup. Not everybody would want to do some of the things. I do know that I worked in the one thing that I do remember that was a group project is that we packed boxes of food for people leading up to Thanksgiving.
Great, I think that's probably something Girl Scouts are still doing.
It's a great question. Sorry, I'm laughing. I love these questions. They're so much fun. My normal job is so boring. Thank you. Oh, Sophie, Molly, you really. I'm gonna make sure Leanna gives you an extra badge. In that picture, I think I was 57. That was 10 years ago. I'm not that old, really. Age is a state of mind.
One question that was on here. Oh, where did it go? Some questions are just coming through to me. Oh, can you tell us all a little bit more about what Kaiser does? Some girls are not familiar.
Sure. Yeah, no problem. So Kaiser is a health plan. And so some of you, may, as I said, may go to, there's a lot of Kaiser buildings around the Metro Denver area. Excuse me, there's one downtown right on Franklin and 17th Street. There's one in Parker. There's one in Colorado Springs. There's one in Lakewood. So it's a medical office where doctors, nurses, and other healthcare professionals work. So you go to Kaiser when you want to get your flu shot, for example, or you want to get an immunization, or you have a cold, or you break a bone. And so Kaiser provides those services to about 1 out of every 5 people in Colorado. So the doctors, when I worked at Kaiser in Colorado, I had about 7,000 employees, and we had about 18 buildings around Colorado. But, because I always like to learn and I like to raise my hand. I was always one of those raise your hand kind of girls. I added Washington State, Oregon, Hawaii, and Georgia. So at the end of the day, I had about 16,000 employees and 10 hospitals and 90 office buildings that people worked in where they delivered healthcare. I have to answer the skiing question because it popped up.
Please do. And then somebody also asked before that, what's your favorite place to go in Colorado?
Okay, so I happen to like to ski in Vail a lot. It's so big. I like the back bowls. I still ski pretty much everything that's black. And I also like, so one thing that I should have told you that I did, it's hard to do this. So when I turned 60, I skied in 60 different places in the United States. And then when I was 50, I did the same thing, but they weren't the same. So I like to run around and see different places. And so I've skied in some crazy little places like Chapman Hill in Durango, where it's just a rope tow that the town runs, to places in France where they're actually 4 times bigger than Vail, and it's a place called Trois-Vallées. So actually, that probably the better answer to that question, what do I want to do in 3 years when I'm 70, is I want to ski in 70 different places.
All right, so some questions. What's your favorite animal, and do you have any animals?
So my favorite animal, let's see, how do I answer this question? I don't have an animal right now. I grew up with beagles, 6 beagles. My parents had beagles. And then when my kids were younger, we had cats, we had goldfish, we had hamsters. Unfortunately, I named each of my kids' hamsters had their names, right? So my kids' names are Rachel, James, and Ben. And I'll never forget coming home one day and my son said, "Mom, Rachel's dead." And I got really nervous. And it turned out we were just talking about the hamster. So I've had different adventures with animals, from my kids dumping soap bubbles into the goldfish bowl, and then the fish didn't quite make it. But right now I'm petless. I think my favorite animal, though, not that you could have this as a pet, would definitely be a cheetah or a jaguar. I just think they're kind of cool and fast and slick.
Very nice. Somebody wrote 6 eagles, and I just want to make sure you said beagles.
Beagles. Beagles. Arf,
arf. Okay, so 2 questions came in, and so I'm going to combo them together. What branch of government do you work in? So maybe you can talk about how your branch also interacts with the other branches of government that you worked in. And can you tell us about what it was like working with whoever was the governor at the time when you were lieutenant?
Sure. So actually, I've been fortunate to work in all levels of government. So I've worked for the federal government. When I went to graduate school, I lived in Washington, D.C., worked for the federal government for a little while in the executive branch. I've worked in city government. When I moved to New York City, I worked for city government here in New York, and I worked for 4 mayors. And that, again, is the executive branch. And then in Colorado was the lieutenant governor. I was in the executive branch. So I was never in the judicial or the legislative branch. But you spend a lot of time with legislators when you're in the executive branch, because remember, they pass the legislature. Somebody's really smart in this group because they asked that question. The legislature passes laws and the executive branch implements the laws. So you had to be very connected, even though I've only been in the executive branch, but at 3 different levels.
Great.
I'm going to turn my light on so that it's a little less dark. Is that better?
Yes, that's much better. Thank you.
Sorry, the sun was going down. It's 2 hours ahead here.
So somebody asked, and this came through just to me, what is the most difficult question that you've been asked? And I think this is probably in relation to talking to the media, but you can answer in any way you want.
Yeah, the most difficult question I was ever asked was, so when I was the lieutenant governor, I was asked a question, and I was asked, do you plan to run for governor? And I said no. So 3 years later, a lot of people, including the governor, said to me, you need to run for governor. You need to run for governor. You really should be the governor. You have the experience. You've got this, excitement about helping the state. And so when I made the decision to run for governor, I was asked the question, wait a second, you said you wouldn't run for governor. Now I had to say, what I said was I didn't plan to run for governor. I had no interest because I'm not really a politician. And so that was a difficult question because I knew I had no intention of doing it in 2016, but 3 years later, I felt like it was the right thing and something I wanted to do. And so it was a little hard to be able to make that transition, but I felt I had to be honest and say, you know what, I'm running because so many people told me that I should. I want to answer the cookie question. Can I answer that? Do I still buy?
Please go right on ahead.
Every single year I buy cookies, and I usually buy enough cookies that I bring them into the office and give them away, because the worst thing would be for me to keep them in the house and eat them all by myself. And I always go to the Women of Distinction dinner that the Girl Scouts have hosted for many years, and that is a fundraiser for them. And that's one of the things you do, is you get cookies before most people get cookies at that dinner.
That is true. So some girls asked about the fall sale, which is when Girl Scouts sell things like cookies and nuts in the fall. And did you ever get to do something like that when you were a Girl Scout, or did you get to sell cookies?
I sold cookies. I definitely sold cookies. And, it was much more of a door to door. We got our cardboard boxes full of cookies and you went door to door, and it was hard work. And, some people's parents sell them for them. My father wouldn't do it because he wanted me to learn the value of hard work. So it was door to door around our neighborhood. Selling the cookies. I have to admit, I never was the champion of the cookie sales because I wasn't, I didn't have a parent that would take the cookies to work for me. So it had to be all my legwork.
All right. I think there was another question in here.
Somebody sold 1,000.
Ooh, that's a lot.
Good for you.
Have you ever met the president or a president of the United States?
Yes, actually I have. So I met Barack Obama before he was the president, and I met him in Washington, D.C. when he was when he was thinking about running. I've met Bill Clinton. I have some nice pictures of Bill Clinton. And I have also met and could pick up the phone and call her right now if I wanted to. Hillary Clinton, who I admire a lot. And she's a very gracious person. And trying to think back, anybody else? No, those two presidents are the ones that I have met. And then, as I said, Hillary Clinton. I'm trying to think if I've met I've met a lot of senators. I mean, I know a good number of the United States senators and a few governors from other states. One of the things that I do now is that I support women who are running for office around the country. And so I'm part of a group called Electing Women. And what we do is we do fundraisers for women who are running for governor or running for the United States Senate. So I've met the governor and the senators from New Hampshire, senators from Louisiana, from Texas, so all from probably about 20 different states. I've been able to meet them and support them.
That is amazing. So we talked about Girl Scout cookies, but I don't think you actually told us what your favorite cookie is.
My favorite cookie, which had a different name, I'm going to use the old name and see if anybody knows this. So my favorite cookie was a gaucho. It still exists as a cookie, but it has a different name. Does anybody know what a gaucho is today? Nope, two wrong answers, but good for you for trying. It's the do-si-do, because I'm a peanut butter lover. If you put chocolate in one place and peanut butter in the other, I'd eat the peanut butter hands down every time.
That I will say, so you and Leanna's cook both, you have the same favorite, a do-si-do, and that is usually not a common answer. I like it though. Somebody asked, and this came up before, since you are, such an avid athlete, are there any sports that you like, kind of team sports? One girl asked about softball.
Yep. So actually, so when I was a young girl, I played softball. It was my favorite sport. But that was, then once I got to high school, I started playing field hockey. And field hockey really, and field hockey on the East Coast and field hockey and lacrosse are way more popular here. So I was a really serious field hockey player and even played for a year in college. And then I dropped out because I had to work to help myself get through college. So one of the things that I did about 5 years ago was I gave my college, which was the University of New Hampshire, money to set up a scholarship in my name that would go to women field hockey players, because there's often not a lot of scholarship money for girls who are playing sports that don't bring in revenue. So every year somebody is named a Donna Lynne Scholar, and they send me a little tape or a video, and I've gone up to New Hampshire to watch them play. And I also gave them money for a bench and an enclosed bench for the girls who were playing field hockey. So field hockey probably was my passion. Now in order, it's skiing, cycling, and then hiking.
Very cool. So somebody asked, did you always work in government? And I think you touched upon this a little bit, but if you want to expand.
Yeah, so I've been working for 44 years, after I graduated, after I went to college and then got my graduate degree. And so 44 years seems like a lot, but it goes by really fast. And so of that 44 years, 23 of them were in government, and 21 of them were in the private sector, so in businesses. So I worked for healthcare organizations, and now I'm at Columbia University in New York for the last 2 years, and I run a big medical center. So similar to hospitals that you know about in Colorado. And I work in the medical center. We have a dental school, a nursing school, a school of public health, and a school of medicine. And so we graduate a lot of the people that take care of all of us, and we train them as well.
Great. So someone asked, why did Savannah Smiles go away? And I'll just give you my suspicion is there, we always want to see a new Girl Scout cookie. So one had to go away so another could come along. Maybe they'll come back one day. I don't know. Ray Lee asked, are you allowed to vote?
I'm allowed to vote, and quite frankly, I've never missed, and actually I shouldn't say this. So I've been able to vote for almost 50 years, right? 49 years. And I've always voted. I missed one vote, which was last November, because I hadn't transitioned from New York to Colorado or figured out which state I was going to vote in, and it was an off year anyway. But I will be voting this year. And I'm excited about the opportunity to be able to vote.
Love that. Pardon me, I might mute myself. I feel a sneeze coming on. So we are kind of coming up against the end of our hour together, but I do want to open it up and remind everybody that we also have Leanna Clark on who's our current CEO. And so if you have any questions for her, I will turn things over to her so she can wrap us up today. There are some more questions in the chat box for you, Donna, but it's totally up to you if you feel you want to answer. some personal questions. And
I'm
that is,
happy, however you would
who are you
like to
voting
do it. I mean, I could either stay on a little bit, or you could send me the questions and I'll send them back. I don't know. I don't know if this group would normally assemble, but I'm not shy about, so far they've asked me how old I am. They haven't asked me how much I weigh, thank God.
well, they're asking you who you're voting for in the future president. And that's up to you if you want to answer.
I am voting for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris.
I
I
definitely
think healthcare is right now
honesty with us.
the most important issue that we have. And politics aside, I think that we need to restore confidence in science because we have a healthcare crisis on our hands. I have seen people die here in New York. As you know, New York got hit by the COVID crisis before pretty much anybody did. And we've got a big problem when it comes to healthcare issues. I wear a mask all the time. I am a believer that people should wear masks. It's the best way to prevent this thing from spreading. And I think we need a new focus on masking and other things.
Great. Well, I definitely appreciate your openness and your honesty throughout our whole session today. I don't see any additional questions coming in through our chat box, so I'm going to turn things back over to Leanna to wrap us up.
Girl Scouts, thank you so much. Amazing questions, and just thank you so much I can see everybody and the attention that you're paying, and such smart questions. And when I look at what Donna has talked to us about today, I think about being a GIRL, and what does that R stand for? Put it in the chat for me. You guys know, because she talked about it, and it's just such an important tenet of who we are as Girl Scouts. It's being a risk taker. And Donna has been a risk taker and a trailblazer in so many ways. When she also, I don't know if she mentioned this, she went back to school at age 50 to get her PhD. That's taking a risk. Climbing all those mountains is taking a risk. Skiing black is taking a risk. Running for governor is taking a risk. It's just so inspiring to me and to all of us. And I will also say what she said about voting. I've got my vote necklace on. I don't know if you can see it, but it says vote. So we should always vote. That's another lesson to take away. And vote the way you want to vote, but vote your voice. And I can't wait till all of you young ladies are old enough to do so. You are just inspirational to me and to Donna, and it was an honor to have the time with you tonight. And thank you so much, Donna Lynne, for joining us. It was wonderful to hear from you.
Thanks, girls.
Thanks everybody so much. I'll send out a follow-up email with a link to our recording, some notes, and we also have a new Meet an Expert patch that you can get to show off your experience participating today. Thank you to Donna, and thank you so much to Leanna as well. I hope everyone enjoyed it even half as much as I did. So thanks everybody. Have a great rest of your day.
Bye, Girl Scouts.